200 Comanche warriors don't just ride into a rancher's pasture by mistake. The night air crackled with unspoken dread as Jackson Bear Calloway squinted across the silvered grass toward the flicker of torchlight on the horizon. The wind carried the distant thump of hooves, slow and measured, like a heartbeat counting down to some inevitable reckoning. Bear's jaw tightened. He'd felt the tremor in his gut before he'd even heard them, an omen older than any preacher's sermon. But let's go back to where it all began. 3 nights earlier, Bear Calloway sat on the rickety porch of his lone cabin, the horizon a bruise of purple light. He poured coffee from a chipped enamel pot, steaming in the cool dusk. He'd come out west chasing solitude. 10 years of dust storms, broken fences, and enough whiskey to numb any lingering sorrow. His ranch lay on the border where plains met canyon, lawless enough for a man to bury the past. Still, Bear's shoulders bore a weight no saloon could lift. That evening, he'd heard a soft stumble by the barn, the kind of sound that hushed even the coyotes. When he raised his lantern, a girl crouched among the hay bales, her silhouette thin and trembling. She looked more specter than flesh. Small frame draped in ragged skirts, skin streaked with grime, eyes the color of rain-washed slate. She didn't speak, only lifted one hand, fingers curling around the lantern's edge, desperate and accusing. Bear wanted to ask questions, but the girl's gaze stopped him. Something in those hollowed cheeks and parched lips told him she was running from horrors he couldn't imagine. Out here, a stray bullet or a pack of wolves might chase a soul as easily as men. He set a hand on her shoulder, steady, not cruel. "You safe here," he said, voice low. She blinked, and relief flickered like a candle. Fear knotted her shoulders, but she didn't bolt. He guided her inside the barn, laid fresh straw, and tossed her a blanket. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the creak of wood and a single lantern's glow broke the stillness. By the time Bear climbed into his bunk, the girl's ragged breathing had softened. He drifted to sleep haunted by visions of pursuers, shadowed riders dissolving into the night. In the morning, he found a scrap of cloth in her fist, the hem of a dress embroidered with a family crest he didn't recognize. There were no letters, no plea, just that silent testament to rootless desperation. Next day, as dawn clawed the sky, Bear led her to the small spring behind the barn. The girl knelt, cupped her hands, and drank like a parched sapling soaking up rain. Bear watched the sun gild the canyon edges, heard the barn door creak behind him, and froze. 2 riders emerged from the canyon, broad-shouldered men in buckskins, rifles slung. Their eyes swept the homestead with the precision of hawks. Bear stiffened, heart hammering. He stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. "You found my sister," the taller of the 2 said, voice neither hostile nor kind, just a fact. The girl looked up, expression torn between fury and relief. She reached for Bear's arm, but he held back, waiting as the riders dismounted with methodical calm. "I won't hand her over," Bear said. His voice was quiet but unyielding. "She's hurt, running from manhunters. She stays till she heals." The riders shared a sharp glance. The shorter one spat into the dirt. "She belongs to the Mahan clan," he said. "They'll not mark their kin as wanted. We've orders to bring her back, dead or alive." Bear's jaw clenched. He'd heard talk. The Mahans, a family of 3 brothers sworn to ancient rivalries, hunting down a sister who'd fled a forced marriage. Out west, blood debts stayed unpaid only until someone drew first blood. Now their volley of threats hung in the crisp morning air. He squared his shoulders. "Not here." A taut silence followed. The girl's breath caught, as if sensing a storm gathering in Bear's stead. He looked at her, saw gratitude and terror braided in her gaze. Without breaking eye contact, Bear spoke again. "She's under my roof. You'll wait until she's ready to go." The 2 riders stiffened like arrows drawn in a bow. The taller one raised a hand, palm outward. "You're an outsider meddling in Mahan affairs. We come for justice." Bear's fist curled until his knuckles shone white. He took a slow breath. "Then you'll find no justice in bloodshed on my land." The spring murmured behind them, unheeding. In that charged moment, Bear felt the weight of a moral choice press on him. Protect a fleeing girl from her own kin or abide a code he never swore to. The world around him held its breath. Crows stilled in the nearby cottonwoods, his horses stamped in distant stalls, the morning sun frozen behind a cloud. He'd rescued her from some unspeakable fate. Would he now expose her to another? Or defy not just her brothers, but the rigid beliefs of every man who thought law lived in tight fists and empty words? Bear didn't lower his gaze. "I made my decision," he said softly. "I'll stand by it." The taller rider's hand dropped slowly to the rifle but strapped at his hip. "Then Mahan Justice rides tonight." In that instant, time seemed to fracture. Bear felt the frontier crack open at his feet, revealing a chasm of choices he couldn't outrun. He glanced at the girl, her eyes wide, lips trembling like a night bird's song before flight. And somewhere beyond the pale morning mist, he heard the thunder of hooves twice removed. He had promised sanctuary. Now he would have to keep it, whatever storm lay on the horizon. The wind rose, carrying whispers of war drums and whispered oaths. Bear swallowed hard, turned to face his adversaries, and braced for the reckoning that would reshape every mile of this land, and every truth he'd ever known. Bear rode into Silver Creek at first light, the girl hidden behind blankets in the loping shadow of his mare. Town was stirring. Laundry on lines clacked in the breeze, shutters creaked open, and the general store's lanterns sputtered out. He tethered his horse out front, his spurred boots clicking across the boardwalk. Every eye turned, curious or wary, as he crossed toward the store. Word traveled fast in a place used to simple headlines. Cattle rustled, stagecoach robbed, or preacher's daughter eloped. Now they'd have a new story. Bear Calloway defying the Mahan brothers. Inside the store, old Mrs. McAllister stacked sacks of flour. Her braid was a silver rope down her back. Her back itself stooped like an exhausted question. Bear tipped his hat. "Ma'am." He spoke quietly, as if a frayed sound might shatter the morning calm. She looked up, eyes sharp as split wood. "Called out from the start, weren't you?" she said, reaching beneath the counter for supplies. "Town's abuzz. You're sheltering that Mahan girl, they say." Bear held still while she set jars of coffee, a sack of meal, and a loaf of rye bread on the counter. "She needed help," he said. "Ain't nothing simple 'bout Mahans," Mrs. McAllister replied, voice low. "They don't forgive and they don't forget. Folks round here warn you'd be safer tossing her back." Bear paid and stepped outside. The sun was higher now, gilding rooftops. Neighbors gathered. Mr. Hargrove, who ran the saloon, leaned against the hitch rail, wiping his hands on a rag. "Bear," he called. "Word is they'll be riding through seeking that girl. You sure that's wise?" Bear brushed dust from his coat. "She's a person, not a prize." Hargrove's grin was thin. "Person who'll bring fire to your door. Best send her down the arroyo, or you'll own her fate and hers." As Bear walked away, the gossip swirled. A vortex of speculation. He was courting ruin, defying frontier justice, maybe even planning a night raid for fun. Across the street, preacher's son Amos watched from the schoolhouse doorway, notebook in hand. He jotted notes, jaw tight. Even the children murmured about the newcomer stirring trouble. Back at the barn, Bear carried the provisions inside. The girl sat on a bale, fingers tracing straw patterns. Fear flickered in her dark eyes when he entered. He placed coffee and bread on a barrel. "Eat," he urged. "You'll need your strength." She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." They ate in silence. Outside, the barn door rattled. His hired hand, Jonas, stood waiting, shoulders hunched. Jonas had known Bear for years, abandoned farms and broken dreams before signing on. His face was pale. "We got a rider just came in. Says he's a messenger from Mahan. Wants to parley under the flag of truce." Bear's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Who rides?" "Name's Tucker Doyle. Claims old man Mahan sent him. Says he'll speak terms." Terms. The word tasted bitter. Bear wiped his mouth. "Set him up in the loft," he said. "Bring the girl down." Jonas nodded, uneasy. He guided Doyle up the ladder. Bear stood by the door, watching the circling clouds. In town, the church bell tolled. Not for worship, but a warning. He could almost hear the undertow of threats rolling toward him. After a moment, Jonas returned. He's armed. Won't speak without that girl present. Bear nodded. He climbed to the loft and found Tucker Doyle, eyes too eager beneath his slouch hat. A Winchester rested across his knees. Bear gestured to a bail. Doyle settled, grinding the rifle butt against his boot. Calloway, Doyle began, voice smooth as greasewood. You're meddling in affairs you don't understand. My brothers want their sister, nothing more. Bear folded his arms. She's no prisoner. She's free. Tucker's laugh was light, but it rattled the rafters. That's not how Mahan justice works. She's stolen honor and they want it back. You protect her. They'll see this as a war on their name. Bear looked out through a gap in the boards, saw horses tethered, Mahan riders glinting in the sun. I saved her from a worse fate than your brothers chasing her. Doyle's eyes narrowed. Her fate is her brother's decision. You think you're playing saint, but you're bringing flames to every homestead within 50 miles. Bear leaned forward. I made my choice. The loft fell silent except for the creak of the barn. Down in the main stall, Jonas kept watch with the girl huddled behind him. She peeked upward, tears pooling at the corners of her eyes. Bear felt a surge of guilt and anger. Guilt for dragging her into fresh danger, and anger at a world where a runaway was treated like stolen cattle. He stood. I won't turn her back over. If Mahan wants to come for her, they'll find me here. Tucker swung the rifle barrel aimed at the floorboards. Suit yourself. Brothers aren't men who negotiate forever. Bear climbed down, heart pounding. He ushered the girl toward the house. Jonas stayed behind to hold Doyle at bay. The two men exchanged a long look, one brimming with unspoken fear, the other pinned under the weight of a promise. That night, Bear rode into Silver Creek again, this time for the preacher. He found Reverend Smith polishing pews by lantern light. The preacher's face was kind but drawn with worry. You seek counsel? The preacher asked. Bear nodded. I need witness. If I shelter her, I can't be accused of kidnapping. I want a safe haven till she chooses her path. Smith set down the rag. Visiting the holy book won't help this choice, he said. But I'll stand by right and mercy. He picked up a Bible and stepped outside. In the courthouse square, he read a passage. Love thy neighbor as thyself. A hush fell over curious onlookers. Shopkeepers, barkeepers, and children creeping from the shadows. Bear felt the weight of their eyes, some approving, some skeptical. Yet in that gathering, a seed planted. Maybe even the hardest hearts could bend. On the ride home, Bear thought of the warnings. Townsfolk whispering of blood debt, Tucker's ominous message, the preacher's hope against doubt. He looked across the mule path winding through Mesquite. Tonight, he would face not only a family's wrath, but the judgment of an entire community. As he reached the barn, smoke curling from the kitchen chimney, he steeled himself. Tomorrow, the Mahans would ride through those gates, and he'd stand between them and the girl he'd sworn to protect. He unsaddled his horse, each stirrup drop a promise. I will do what's right, no matter the cost. Inside, Jonas went to lock the barn door. The girl met Bear's gaze, sorrow and gratitude mingling in her expression. He'll come for me, she said softly. Bear knelt beside her. He placed a calloused hand over hers. Then we stand together. He rose and turned toward the night. Beyond the corral, the prairie lay dark, a vast witness to every choice made under the stars. In his mind, Bear replayed townsfolk warnings and whispered prayers, hunted by conscience and honor alike. Come morning, he would hold his ground, and the moral weight of that decision would shape every heartbeat of this land. The first scout came just after dawn, thin smoke curling over the northern ridge, ink black against a bruised sky. Bear stood at the barn door, the girl beside him, Jonas and the hired hand crouched behind a stack of hay bales. Horses whinnied in their stalls like frightened children. The air tasted of dust and fear. It's them, Jonas whispered, voice trembling. Riders in a single line. 6 of them, barebacks, silent as ghosts. Bear studied the ragged column strung along the horizon. No war paint, no torches, just riders sliding through the dawn mist, rifles slung low. These were the Mahan brothers themselves. Red Mahan, the eldest, his face a carved mask. Dry-tongued Simeon, eyes like river stones. And the 3 younger, fierce and narrow-shouldered, their saddles worn smooth. A tremor ran through the girl. She gripped Bear's coat, knuckles white. He knelt, meeting her gaze. They're coming, he said softly. But not for a fight yet. Jonas swallowed. They won't parley. They want her. Bear nodded. He rose, stepping into the corral as the horses were hastily brought out and tethered. Through the metal bars of the gate, the riders formed a loose semicircle, dismounting in deliberate silence. Red Mahan stalked forward, boots crunching on gravel. You keep stubborn company? Red said, voice low and controlled, as if each word were weighed on a scale. We offered terms, 6 horses. You refused. Bear's jaw was tight. I offered mercy. Red's eyes flicked to the girl standing behind Bear. She trembled but held her posture, defiance tinged with dread. Red crouched, leveling a finger at her. Your mercy nearly cost her life. She owned no money, no kin. She ran from us for reasons we'll uncover ourselves. Simeon stepped to Red's side, kicking at the dust. Bear Calloway, you're from Missouri, if rumors tell true. You think you're better than a Mahan? We're justice here. Bear held the gate. Justice isn't blood for blood. Red laughed, a sound brittle as dry wood. Blood is all we understand. He stood and spat. I don't want more talk. Release her. Bear's hand drifted toward his rifle, strapped to the corral rail. But the girl's wide eyes stopped him, fear and hope colliding like thunderheads on the plains. He withdrew his hand. Come for me instead. A hush settled. Even the breeze held its breath. Jonas edged closer to Bear, hand on his revolver. The hired hand paled, sweat purling at his hairline. Red studied Bear's face, searching for weakness. If it's a fight you want, you'll get it. But know this, Mahan vengeance is slow and lasting. It'll come at dawn and at dusk, in dreams and at your hearth. He turned, signaling his brothers. They mounted in tight formation, horses stamping, muttering flanks. Red paused, boot in stirrup. Tomorrow, at first light, you bring her when the sun touches the chapel steeple. Or you wake to an empty ranch, and the girl is gone. Your choice. With that, they slid into the fog, hoofbeats muffled by the damp earth. The world seemed to exhale. A gust of wind rattling the barn door, stirring straw. Bear closed the gate and bolted it. He turned to Jonas. They'll circle the ranch tonight. Scouts and traps. Jonas shook his head. They'll wait till morning. Bear moved to the girl who had backed against the fence. He knelt and brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. No running this time, he said gently. We face them together. Her voice trembled. I can't let them kill you. Bear's gaze softened. It's my land. My choice. He led her inside the house, bolting the door behind them. The kitchen hearth glowed with embers, but the room felt cold. Bear built a fire, and the 3 of them huddled around a table, candlelight dancing across their worried faces. Jonas spread a map on the table, yellowed parchment marked with homesteads and fences. We fortify the house, Jonas said. Barricade windows, move livestock to the barn loft. They won't storm through walls. He tapped the map. This back window overlooks the corral. Easy shot if they dismount. Bear nodded. We'll hold them off till Reverend's men arrive. He sent riders for help. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Why help me? I'm not worth it. Bear pressed a hand on hers. What's worth more than another life? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling shutters. Bear stepped to the window and peered through a crack in the board. Shadows flickered, figures slipping between the mesquite. A distant thump of hoofbeats echoed in circles around the perimeter. The world had narrowed to a single question. Would mercy be met with bullets? In the dim corridor, Bear unslung his rifle and checked the action. Jonas loaded sidearms, each click and snap resonating like a pistol's promise. The girl sat on a wooden chair, back straight, eyes fixed on Bear's movements. Fear had sharpened her features into resolve. Jonas spoke softly. "They'll test the doors first. We should let them get close enough." Bear gave a curt nod. "We make them see human flesh before metal." They stacked crates by the door, flour barrels, crates of canned peaches, forming a makeshift barricade. Bear clapped his hands lightly. "Listen, when they knock, I'll ask if they come for peace. If they don't lower their rifles, we hold our fire." Silence fell, broken only by the fire's hiss. Then came a low rap at the front door, deliberate and slow 3 knocks, measured like the beat of a drum. Bear rose, rifle cradled in his arms. He called in a steady voice, "State your purpose." A burst of laughter answered, rough and cold. "You called it." Red's voice drifted through the planks. "Justice." Bear exhaled, shouldering the rifle. Then stepped lightly. Slow footsteps crossed the porch. The hinges groaned under weight, and 2 rifles came into view through the gap. Light slanted across their barrels like a warning. Bear steadied his aim on the first silhouette. Jonas knelt by the side window, revolver raised. The girl shivered beside Bear, but held her ground. Red's head tilted once as if studying a mule. "Opening move, Bear?" Bear swallowed. "Yes, you won't kill the girl, not here." "Funny," Red muttered. "I believe it's you they aim to save. But mercy's a trap." For one taut moment, corridors of intent and fear converged. Bear's finger hovered by the trigger. The world teetered on that fulcrum, blood or mercy, survival or sacrifice. And somewhere behind the rifles, the Mahan brothers waited, ready to tip the scale. Then, a distant wail, children's voices raised in a Sunday hymn from Reverend Smith's church. The rifles wavered. Bear felt it, a tremor of uncertainty passing through their fingertips. Mercy had allies he hadn't known he possessed. Red's voice softened, almost inaudible. "We'll call this." Parley paused. "Dawn." A rifle rang once, tapped against the wood, and the footsteps retreated. The door slammed shut, shaking the house to its bones. Silence settled like dust. Bear lowered his rifle. The girl folded into his arms, tears at last breaking free. Jonas exhaled in relief. Outside, the Lodge of Silence held sway. Dawn's promise lay just beyond the horizon, fraught with questions and the knowledge that tomorrow, at sunrise, justice would ride again. Thought for a few seconds. The chapel bell tolled at first light, its hollow call drifting across the corral and into the rising sun. Bear stood at the gate, rifle slung at his back, boots dusted gold by morning's glow. The girl, no longer nameless, stood beside him, her skirts washed clean by pre-dawn dew. Behind them, Jonas and the hired hand watched from the barn loft, rifles ready but unused. Somewhere in the quiet, the wind whispered promises of reckoning. On the ridge, hoofbeats drummed in measured rounds. Bear felt the tremor beneath his feet before he saw the riders. 5 Mahans, unmasked now by daylight. Their horses moved with the grace of predators on the prowl. Red Mahan rode foremost, face hardened by years of vows, while Simeon, the younger brothers, flanked him like living shadows. Bear lifted a hand in greeting that was neither a weapon nor a surrender. "You asked for this place," he said quietly. "Here you find me, and her." Red dismounted, eyes flicking to the girl. She drew a steady breath and straightened. Bear nodded to Jonas, who unbolted the gate. The Mahans walked forward, boots clacking on wood planks. Red halted just beyond the threshold. "You've broken every rule of kinship and frontier code," he said. His voice carried the weight of old oaths. "Yet here you stand." Bear met his gaze. "I kept my word." The girl stepped forward then, raising her chin. Bear watched her, surprised by her courage. She spoke in a low voice, steady as the chapel bell behind them. "I fled because my brothers sought to sell me," she said in Mahan tongue, each syllable clear. Bear Calloway did more than save me. He showed me mercy. To judge him for that is no better than the men who owned me. Red's jaw flexed. He stared at her, as if hearing her voice for the first time. The younger Mahans shifted, unsettled by her words and the quiet power in her stance. Bear realized that in speaking, she had become the bridge he could not. Simeon cleared his throat. "If you'll forgive our doubts, sister," he said, voice half lost in the wind. "We see now that this man stands by you not for gain, but for kindness." Red's gaze moved from her to Bear. For a long moment, the only sound was the chapel bell's echo and a single horse's gentle snort. Finally, Red let his shoulders drop. He drew a leather pouch from his vest and untied it. Inside lay 5 sun-bleached horses' reins, the tokens of payment he'd once demanded. He offered them to Bear. "We honor your kindness with what we owe," he said, voice rough but sincere. "She goes with us no longer." He turned to face the girl. "If you choose to stay with this man, we will protect your place in our blood. No more debts, no more hunts." She shook her head, tears shining in the morning light. "My place is here," she said softly. She laid a hand on Bear's arm. "I choose home." Red nodded, a flicker of relief softening his features. He motioned to his brothers. "Then we ride in peace." The Mahans remounted. Before turning away, Red lifted his hat to Bear. "You have our thanks and our silence." Then, like wind-swept leaves, they disappeared down the dusty trail toward the canyon. Bear watched them go, heart pounding with relief and wonder. He turned to the girl and took both her hands in his. "Peace," he whispered, as if still tasting the word for the first time. Weeks passed, and the season shifted toward harvest. The ranch hummed with quiet activity. Barrels of peaches arriving from the railroad, new fencing along the creek, and the steady clip-clop of horse hooves. The girl, whose name Bear now called Lena, bloomed under the sun's warmth. She worked alongside Jonas mending tack, her laughter bright as wildflowers in spring. Reverend Smith visited often, reading scripture with Lena in Choctaw tongue, the only language Bear hadn't perfected. In those moments, Bear saw a life beyond survival, one filled with community and shared stories around the hearth. One evening, Bear found Lena on the porch, paintbrush in hand. She was drawing the canyon walls on a scrap of parchment, tracing lines with quiet reverence. He sat beside her and watched the sun dip into the horizon. Colors deepened, and the world's edges softened. She looked up. "Thank you," she said, voice low, "for everything." He tipped his hat, uncertain. "You saved me too." She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. "I needed a home. I found one." Bear rose and offered his hand. "Then let me give you the rest of mine." She took it without a word. Together, they walked into the golden dusk, shadows stretching behind them like guardians. Years later, Lena stood at the edge of a new settlement, Silver Creek's one-room schoolhouse, where children learned to read and write in English and Choctaw. Bear watched from the porch of his homestead, heart swollen with pride. Lena, now dressed in simple calico, led a group of young girls through the alphabet, her voice patient and gentle. He tipped his hat and nodded to Jonas, who grinned from the barn. The world had changed for them and maybe for the frontier itself. Mercy, once rare as rain in a drought, had taken root and blossomed into something stronger than vengeance. As the bell rang for recess, Lena spotted Bear and waved. Children followed her gaze and raced across the yard, hollering and laughing in both languages. Bear lifted his hat in salute, and she curtsied with a mischievous grin. He turned away, breathing in the warm breeze. Beyond the schoolhouse, the canyon walls glowed again at sunset, timeless and patient. Bear knew that every choice, every act of kindness, had shaped this peace. In the echo of hooves and hymns, he heard a promise kept, not only to a fleeing girl, but to the land itself.